So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to my channel. Um, there's no history stream tonight. I think something may have happened with Iron Duke that mean that he wasn't able to do it. So we'll do our part two on Captain Cook at some other point. But because I had a bit of time on my hands, and because more importantly, the news, which I've been sort of holding off doing a video or stream about, the more like large or global things, because I wanted to see how this would play out. And as it appears to be the case, which I sort of thought that nothing ever happened, that all this bluster from Trump yesterday and day before um, turned into an absolute nothing. But what has surprised me is on the level of the, I guess you say, American capitulation, um, and also the Israeli-backed Zionist crowd within the United States, and here in Britain as well, one notable little reform twink who was also deeply upset about this, have turned on Trump as well and are not happy. Mark Levin, very, very angry and upset. There's quite a few that are very angry and upset. And also the Iranian diaspora, the Pahlavists, I guess you could say, the monarchist Pahlavists, are also very upset because their sort of little fantasy didn't come true. So the back and forth from the war, this conflict, was effectively about regime change. The origin of this was down to regime change, and this was the narrative being played out both by the United States and by Iran. Looking at this, some of you may have noticed the title here. I call it 1812 syndrome, and then the mother of all tacos, MOA Tacos, mother of tacos. That's the reference there. If you remember, and so I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here, but if you cast your minds back on my channel, I did a stream with Colonel Pride's Review, and this was like a military history stream, and we looked at the War of 1812. I was slightly more interested in the legacy of that war, and what sort of legacy and narrative the Americans, and also, well, mainly the Americans, what they sort of how it's interpreted by Americans and Canadians today, and looking at it on the whole, I originally viewed it as, well, this was a war that effectively America lost. They didn't fulfill their aims, and this was, as we saw in the proclamation of war between the American military Continental Army at the time. This was about the seizure of effectively the colonies at the time, so Upper Lower Canada, and elsewhere. But then they made no bones about it on the political level as well. They wanted the total hegemony over North America, including the British colonies there. So that would include Nova Scotia, Rupert's Land, and all territories included. And the fact that that war was a failure in, number one, seizing those colonies, a series of military blunders led by a very incompetent officer corps, which was changed quite frequently. And it wasn't towards, I think, even a couple years in until they got sort of their act together. You had a few victories, naval victories in the lakes, and it sort of led to this stalemate for a brief period, and then of course at that point the Napoleon was ousted, and there was troops were freed up to come to the North American theatre of war and to fight from British troops. And then of course we know you had the burning invasion and the burning down of the US Capitol, Washington DC, the burning of the White House, and not to mention the raids into upper New York state and other places, and also the bitterly divided political nature, where you had the the Republican Democrats and the I forgot the name of the other party, but the sort of more New England types who were in favour of friendlier, closer relationships with Great Britain, and refused to, in some cases, refused to cooperate with the American government during this conflict. Just a quick apology. I'm just going to make sure that my recording is coming through okay. Yeah, it's okay. So that and then that was my understanding, because I sort of prior knowledge to this, but I did a sort of more deep dive, and I looked at the more the causation of the war, the press gangs, the the sort of attitude from the Americans at the time, and all these things, and the what was going on in those out west, particularly the fighting with Tecumseh and the Indian Confederacy led by him. And so there was always that mixed up. But I was when a lot of Americans said that they won that war against the British. And for me, there's no logical or rational interpretation that suggests that at all. You didn't win those territories that you wanted to claim. Your capital was burnt down, and the only success that you did achieve was you crushed native tribes. The the Tecumseh's Confederation in the Michigan Territory, and then the rebellious tribes in the South in what's now Alabama and so on that we talked about. Was it the Red Sticks or something like that? Cherokee-esque tribes. But those were territories you already claimed. Those were territories you already had a claim to and occupied at the time. It's just that these tribes live within them. So, when you actually look at the narrative there's no reasonable suggestion to say that they won it. In fact, that you could argue that, well, it was a bit of a tie, there was no like boundary changes, but I mean, reality is you lost the war. Your objectives weren't completed. Britain still held on to those colonies, which then would flourish into Canada as we have it today. And even still, it had to be negotiated a demarcation line for future westward expansion, where America is restricted to, the one portion, and then the British and Canadian British settlers are restricted to the other. So that, for me, and learning about how many Americans view that this was a win, and they usually are, and of course you have like the Battle of New Orleans, which was like, again, had no direct connection or connotation to the Canadian colonies which the Americans wanted. It was just like some sort of symbolic, nature of that they managed to regain control of their own territory, their own claimed territory. Like, well done, well done. You reclaimed your own territory. Well done, I guess. And so this was like, and I thought maybe this is partly chauvinism. This because remember, this all happened on the eve of Pax Americana. Like you had the Great Westward Expansion, you had the American-Mexican War, you had the Texas Uprising, the Californian one, then the Civil War, and then you sort of like turbocharged America and all that sort of stuff, and the Gold Rush and what have you. Um, yeah, it is, and that that sort that's probably how that justification comes along. But I actually think in some ways this has become sort of like, while they're confined in their own continent, they've actually become um, like living in some sort of other plane of existence where the rules of, and this is weird because you don't see this with Canadians as much. You don't see this with the Mexicans. It's sort of like an American thing. So maybe it's the maybe it's because it's like a form of American exceptionalism or something. But the their terms and definition of winning is kind of like the basic of, well, we still exist, which isn't, that's not a that's not like a key point for winning. I still exist. I'm still standing, sort of thing. Um, and so fast forward to current year, what we've seen is Donald Trump has started. Well, whether he started this war, that baby. There was a joint war effort with Israel and America against Iran. As everyone was told from the outset, both by Benjamin Netanyahu and Trump, this was about regime change. They wanted the Islamic regime led by the mullahs and a Ayatollah of Sharia Islam to be removed as the government body of the of Iran, and to be replaced. You know, not no one really knows by what. I think and Trump was sort of, and his lot in America wanted like something internal, so maybe like a um, military guy or someone within the country to bring about that change. You did have a similar thing with Israelis as well. The Benjamin Netanyahu was talking about like an internal revolt. You did have those on sort of more fringe networks that wanted the crown prince that's lounging in California, um, and the Palavists to do their thing. But I mean, they weren't organized as in any capacity, so nothing happened there. Um, but they wanted, that was the war goal. It was regime change, and they were going to bomb it. They were going to neutralize as much as the military as possible for that to happen, and it didn't happen. uh, all the bombing efforts, all the military efforts didn't break the country. In fact, as it appears to have, and if you remember, they wanted to even play certain ethnic groups within Iran against each other, because so you have the largest one, which is the Persians, but then you have like the Lurs, you have various and Kurds and Armenians and so on and so forth, various different Iranian groups within Iran. And effectively, I think the idea was for like a balkanization leading to a Syrian style civil war. Um, Multiple factions fighting over land easier to influence and what have you. And that didn't happen. In fact, they all seemed to unite behind the regime there, the government. And as a result, they were able to fight back. And the way that they could fight back was with the Strait of Hormuz, which is the, as we've all sort of found out this week, you have the oil fields, particularly of Saudi and of the Gulf states, where oil is transported from, was under, well, it was the threat of attack, where attacks would happen, but also Iran was able to close it. And US military bases were being attacked, properties and buildings within the Gulf states like Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and so on were attacked. And that in on itself, there wasn't really much defense from America. You did have the Patriot missile system, anti-aircraft missile system, but you had these drones that were able to come through. Those miniature model plane style drones, and they were able to cause enough damage, and also the threat of it. But more importantly, it was the Strait of Hormuz, which that has been what arguably has been the most point of contention, because it's the transportation of oil, and also Iran has been targeting oil fields within Saudi itself. That has happened as well. So it's put the whole world on notice of how fragile that region is. Probably it's probably something which hasn't really been discussed on a wider scale. The not just the Gulf, but actually on a wider scale with Saudi and everything, which are all, by the way, the sort of puppets of America, and to a lesser extent, America's #1 ally in the region. And so last night or night before now, I can't recall, Trump did a series of tweets, or not tweets, sorry, Truth Social posts, saying that you need to reopen the straits. You need to reopen the straits. You need to back down, or we're going to end this fucking civilization, or however the terminology used. And as people have noted, he's sounding more and more deranged at this point, where it's basically living in the sort of delusional territory. And yesterday we were promised, the culmination of all-out total war. And what has happened today? What has happened today? Let me just share the screen. Here we go. The United States, Iran, Israel have agreed a 2-week ceasefire. Well, and this is the thing, it looks like that Israel didn't agree that this was the United States, ceasefire, and the Straits of Hormuz reopened and allowed oil tankers through, although it appears Iran sent missiles to Israel overnight. And I think some people, even the more because David Atherston, he's just a Zionist talking puppet. So his view on this is always going to be warped anyway. But if you look at the reaction from this, as it has just been stated, before, the Strait of Hormuz was a point of contention. There wasn't really one power over it. You had, this was like a sort of battleground of, saber rattling at most. But now Iran has control over it. While much of their navy has been destroyed, they still have the small PT boats. They're able to close the straits. They have the leverage over that now. And this is what, Iran has been. And just think about the American war game here and the Israeli war game here. All right. So guarantee that Iran will not be attacked again, permanent end to the war, not ceasefire. This is what Iran's been asking for. All of which, for the most part, including the reconstruction ahead of reparations for conflict, has been agreed. And you've got some who are sort of coping and just deluding themselves in chat here. But what we have seen is a total capitulation after this bizarro 2-day this bizarro 2-day call for total war with Easter Bunny. And I couldn't help but thinking, how is the history books, in 10 years, 20 years time, how is this going to be recorded? How is this going to be reported on? A big part of course, last few days, which may have been a bit of a distraction story, was that downed US airmen, though it seems that there were a great deal of planes, and I've seen there's one theory going on that this was actually like a bear pigs operation, that was some sort of military action which basically went horribly wrong for the Americans, and this has resulted in some sort of very, very humiliating defeat, which is why you've had this this mother of all taco from Trump here, from where he was like ranting and raging with Easter Bunny and Pete Hegseth and his army and generals, about bringing down, wanting to be Alexander the Great, bringing down this civilization, and instead he's like, just kidding, accept demands, see ya, happy Easter, everybody. I mean, and what's really funny is, I want to know who is a Trump loyalist now who is still on board with like trusting the plan. Chat, can anyone, Lukey, can you help me in chat? Is it like Dr. Steve Turley, like the last guy standing? Because everyone's sort of turned on him at this point. You've had like Alex Jones, all that, but basically calling him to be removed under health ground. What was it? The 20th Amendment or whatever it is, to remove him. Basically, what they wanted to do for Biden, a lot of the Republicans wanted to do. Captive Dreamer, that's one. It's just, who's that, like the woke right guy? The guy that was saying, calling everything woke right. When you're actually winning and not such a pathetic loser, woke right. That guy. He's I've seen him about sort of, but for the most part, not Matt Welsh. It's the other one. I have to think of his name. He likes to fancy himself an intellectual, but he's just he has like the gormless look that you see like on most people, to be honest. Anywho, yeah, there's still a selection of people out there who are defending this, but on the most part, I could probably count them on my hand, to be honest. There's not that many now. I think everyone's sort of like, you know, it's kind of like you can't build up to such a big event and not and then just go kidding by, you know. At least at least Madison and Co. them lot in 1812, Henry Harrison, at least they went. I mean, okay, yeah, they fucked up. Their militia were unreliable and unprofessional. At least they followed through on it, you know. At least they didn't like send out these proclamations like we're going to invade and take it, and then like nothing happens and taco. That would, I mean, it's kind of mental. It is kind of mental, all this. And I think one of Trump's strengths, and this is something I've noticed since he's been around for what, like 10 years now, 10, 11 years, is in the past he's able to pick up a subject, say something about it, which is, historically, it would have been like wildly controversial. CNN, NBC, all the usual would freak out about it. You'll have Democrats condemning him and some Republicans condemning him, and then he would like own the subject, run with it, and then and then repeat, rinse and repeat. Where he could sort of control the media narrative on his own terms and framing, and that ability is lost. He can't do that anymore. That sort of perk of his is gone. If you remember, in Spider-Man 2, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, when Peter Parker, Spider-Man, loses his abilities, it's kind of like that. He's losing his edge. He lost his edge. He lost his ability, and he can't do it anymore. And at the same time, for this, and this is something that goes back to his character, is he was always like this, presented or he presented himself as this total alpha, you know guy who wouldn't be told, talked to. He wouldn't be talked down to by anybody, and he's been a total bitch for Mark Levin, the American Zionist crowd, and Israel. He's been totally, uh, you know, captured by those guys and it's been a while. I mean, Kushner, it's been a while, but it's sort of got to the most like farcical level since he's been elected. Anyway, it's been total farce, and um, I mean, I'm on the view. I think his presidency is done at this point. There has been signaling, that even J.D. Vance has been distancing himself from this whole, um, affair. If you notice, he hasn't been like, going on television. This has been something that he's not, wanting to have his name next to. I do wonder if there will be a push to have him removed on medical grounds, or there'll be some pressure for him to retire. You know, they could do that. Probably at this stage they should, but yeah, I mean with JD, it'd be the same thing. It'll be the same thing. So, and this is, and it's really funny because this is sort of uh, I think this has somewhat broken the American conservative movement now. I mean, whether it existed for a while now, but it's definitely broken it. And also, another side topic from this, it is, the Zionism, um, however you want to describe it, has been totally vilified in both parties, even the Republican Party. You have like that fishback character in Florida. Of course, Nick Fuentes and the America First movement, which has a lot of Republican and sympathizers and all that sort of stuff within its ranks. And so, it's kind of like the it's kind of like the, they've sort of what I saw the comparison today with like Crusader Kings, but they've sort of angered everybody at court. They've angered everybody at the court, and there's all like maxed out on their sort of trying to political machinations, and everyone's turned on them. You do have, and I'm even, and there's one prediction. I think the neocons, and I saw Lukey in chat saying there's neocons. I think there will be a section of neocons which will dump the Zionist stuff, or siphon it off, maybe be a bit more softer on it, sort of do it down a bit, and you'll see like soft anti-Semitism. Or let me just rephrase it, because I'm seeing it more now. You know how we have like the counter jihad, Tommy Robinson's crowd and stuff. I can foresee a like counter Semitism movement that's on the same line, where it goes into kook sphere. And this is, I wanted to do an article on this for the Sovereigntists at some point, because this is something that is I think will happen while this new political reality becomes formalized, particularly on people's attitudes on, uh, the Middle East, the big ally in the Middle East. There will be people then looking at the dual loyalty and all that sort of stuff, and then the historical context for all that, and things will be brought up. Will there be a point where, to discredit quote unquote anti-Semites, they will have figures who are locals, who will push narratives? And I think we've seen this. I saw clips, and there were people at my workplace who will talk about this. That Louis Theroux documentary on the manosphere, and you have that Byron. There's a chap called Byron or Myron, and he's some like influencer, and they're all in Florida, by the way. They're all in Florida, and his sort of thing is he does a podcast. He has um, um, he has like this podcast, and he has like all these women on, like these who come to Florida because they want to like become like models, or something like that, and this is like a bit of an exposure, and he'll sort of like berate them, and like, he'll ask them like topics which they won't know much about, because they're silly bimbos, so they're not going to know, and just sort of like a ritual humiliation thing. And then you'll sort of go on and do like your run-of-the-mill anti-Semitic stuff. Quote, when I say anti-Semitic, I mean like what you expect to hear. right? You know, the tropes, if you will. And on many occasions there are, you know, like with most stereotypes, there's always a bit of truth mixed in there. But that being said, he'll say that. And you have to realize, like, if you look at the person, and this is where you look at the message and the messenger, how do you discredit a message? Well, you have a messenger who is easily to discredit. He is a person who's a former, I believe, FBI or CIA guy, one of the alphabet agencies. This fella, and suddenly he comes out with a podcast, and he has all these followers, and let's be honest, Florida is a hotbed of, you know, of Jewishness and Zionism. If we're being honest here, okay, that's what it is. And suddenly you have all these figures that come out who are, you know, the face of, you know, critical of Israel and dual nationality and the influence of them, and these are the face of it. I mean, they're just there to discredit it. They're there to discredit that message. And while it's sort of like trendy and everything at the moment, give it a few years. And it's kind of like that. It's like what happened with the BNP in some ways, where you had some people today who won't talk to you about it because um, they feel ashamed of that period, or they regret being involved, because it's kind of like, you know, the cranks can take over and capture a message. But it's not so much cranks, it's kind of like that's how the system, this is a form of containment, and this is what I'm getting at. And this is kind of like what happened to the counter jihad stuff. Now, in some ways, a lot of the counter jihad stuff in its infancy, they were right. There was a problem, because if you were arguing, like, say, 30 years ago or 40 years ago even, on the point of integration, if you want integration, well, yeah, that wouldn't be possible from these highly tribalistic societies. And then, of course, if you talk about the abstract of Islam and in European Western canon, then yeah, Islam is totally incompatible. It's a totally different mindset. I mean, forget the religiosity of, you know, the similarities of God or one God, or man within, you know, the concept of a divine within man and God and what have you. The way that it interprets the world is radically different in the Western mindset than it is in, say, the Semitic and Eastern mind. And you see that in the way that they behave, how communal it is, how um, it the rituals, a lot of the Christian rituals harken back to Greco-Roman paganism, particularly within Catholicism, and same in you know, other forms as well. It takes different forms. In Iran, with the Shia Islam, we talk about Iran, they have pre-Islamic festivals mixed in with Shia Islamic celebrations. So it is a total difference. But the thing though is that was then you know, hyped up as a tool to attack Muslims on the basis of their threat, saying that they're going to take over the country. They're going to take over, this hyperbolic threat of they're taking over the country. I mean, in reality, no, they're not, and not on that scale. And also, it's not like they're actively converting people, because it's not an internal threat, it's an external threat. If you look at history of Islamic powers, it's always an external threat through conquest. Hence why, to deal with it in the past, it's always been done through military force. You look at Spain, you look at you know, the Balkans, wasn't very successful until later on, towards the end of the Ottoman Empire. And you look at southern Italy as well. You know, with Sicily, that was Islamic for a while. It was and the Normans removed them from there. It's called the Whatever Podcast. Yeah. So it's kind of like that whole thing of like people want your anger or your fear for various certain agendas, and you know, and I'm trying to think, like 10, 20 years ahead after all this, silliness you see on the screen here. It You're going to see a lot of people. It's going to, you're gonna, they'll continue on this sort of like generational run, and and all that with Trump at the moment, and with what's going on in the world, and um I think on like the anti-Israel stuff, that's going to be contained. That's going to be contained down to kooks and cranks who will dilute the message. And look, there is a problem. I mean, one of the biggest problems is its influence, not, I mean, within government, but its influence within all Western societies. If you look at, even like the story of Kanye West today, the festival where this collection of rabbis got it shut down, that is a problem. You know, I don't think my local Anglican vicar has those connections to call up on the government to get something shut down that quickly. I doubt the Catholic one or Presbyterian. That is a problem. But the problem is now is to deal with that, you can't have these, whatever podcast people being the messengers, because number one, I'm certain they are controlled by the state to discredit the message, and it will put particularly people who are very critical of that nation and Zionism will be put back many, many decades. It will. I'm not going to go into whole false flag stuff, but that is also something that could come down the road as well. Ultimately, the biggest threat and the big story of our age is how Europeans in their respective nations deal with the globalized society and the influence of political minorities and foreign influence. That is the big thing. That is the big thing we have to deal with. No other political party is talking about it. Even, unfortunately, I don't like saying this, even Restore. I don't think Restore fully comprehend this. And I was disappointed to hear some of Rupert's positions. I think, I think he needs to, I know he has to be careful what he says, but he has to sort of also realize, that this, for the changes that he wants, he has to, he can't retreat to the center. He has to go to, he has to step up and be the guy. The man we see on screen here had the chance to be the guy to step up, and he didn't. Now he's posing with a bunny. And maybe it requires a certain frame of character. I mean, we need a Cromwell. we need a we need a we need a we need a I won't say, I won't say who we need, but we need someone with vitality, vigor, and vision. We need an Ayatollah. No. So this is from a US, so it's on Piers Morgan as well. Let me just share this a sec.
Leaders. But that does not guarantee strategic success. And in this case, the goal was to take down the regime, not just simply kill leaders. The goal was to weaken Iran, its power. And what we see after 17 days of war is the regime is resilient and more dangerous than ever than it was before the bombing. And Iran is now more powerful than it was. In fact, Iran has just achieved what we have spent 50 years in the US military in America trying to prevent, which is control of the Straits of Hormuz. That was the #1 goal of American grand strategy in the Middle East, not Israel. This was the #1 goal, and this is a catastrophic failure. And it is what I call the escalation trap, Piers. It's completely, I've seen this for decades with the Clinton administration. This is not unique to President Trump, but he has fallen into being mesmerized by the power, the exquisite power of our military into thinking it's omnipotent, that it can achieve any strategic objective. The fact of the matter is, we have failed strategically, and we're getting deeper into the trap, which is why none of those allies you just pointed out, perhaps maybe the UK, will see, want to go down the tubes with us here. This is a very, very, very serious problem. And I don't say this with any.
I really hope the UK doesn't want to go down the tubes, as he put it, because I mean, there's only so much humiliation this country can take. I mean, imagine, like, in the space of a few weeks, we've had Matt Goodwin lecturing everybody with this stupid fucking book. And then this, you know. Do you know what? I actually think when COVID happened, I do think, like, I just died and went to hell, and I'm just now in hell. Do you ever feel that? You know, like, you died, you just went to hell? That would explain everything. That would explain everything. All the people I don't like are here. Oh God. Sorry, anyway, let's continue with this.
Any glee, if I could just say one more thing. This is one of the worst.
Oh, that's the end of it. Yeah. This is what's sort of happened is effectively America has come out weaker. It definitely looks like, you know, the Americans have come out weaker, and also their bases in the Gulf are gone, totally, like, gone. I think it's safe to say this is the American Suez that I saw AA sort of from his Prophets of Doom book, the Glub, this theory that empires exist on a 250-year time frame. And I know this has been I did a video on stream or something that sort of talk about this, because there were a lot of people that are saying, well, what about the Roman Empire, all that sort of stuff. It does look that this is the sort of gradual collapse of the American Empire from what we remember, particularly from, like, your childhood, before 9/11 sort of thing. That American Empire, the American Empire of 1991, First Gulf War, was probably the peak. I think America peaked in 1991. You know, the Cold War comes to an end, the Eastern Bloc and the Soviet Union collapses. that's kind of like your peak. Dan Tubb wanted the Yanks to blame their failure in Iran on us not helping them so Trump doesn't look so bad. Did he really say that? Was that did he really say that? Oh my goodness me. Well, he is completely uh, that's disappointing. That is disappointing. How old? I think he's like in his 40s, or so, maybe a bit older. You know. Just to your point, Tharium, in Glubb's interpretation, the empire starts not with, your understanding is like, after Second World War, the empire starts with a spark. So from his interpretation, it would be the American Revolution, because that is the spark of an identity, that, or the premise of an America, which then, and I mean, American exceptionalism, imperialism, what have you. You could argue, the Manifest Destiny was like one of the first iterations of that. So from that understanding, 250 years, it starts with the revolution, which I think is like 250 years ago, give or take. I think Iran's going to be the new hegemon. I know Russia have designs on north-south routes pop line. Yeah, because look, Iran is an ancient civilization. You have, in my capacity, you have China, Iran, and sort of like the Latin-speaking countries. So that would be Italy, France. I guess you could include Spain, and so on. Parts of Europe, who are, no matter what happens, they are always power brokers in those regions. At one point it was the Greco-Roman world against the Parthians, then the Sasanians, then the Islamic caliphates, then the various Islamic Iranian regimes. It's a permanent thing that goes back thousands of years. And same with China. It doesn't matter whether it be the Mongols, the Han, the Tang, the Song. It's civilizational. Oh yeah, erase that bit. Middle East. Oh, that's to your comment. Yeah, segment about should villains again. I swear. I mean, I think he's in his 40s. There is, look, there is one problem with a lot of that generation. I'm going to be honest. This is, because it was like Pax Americana in the cultural sense and in the political military sense. There's a lot of glazing, and also there's a lot of, and I'm going to be honest, a lot of inbuilt self-hatred, because growing up we were all taught, and particularly under his time, anti-imperialism, liking Britain, liking the British Empire, and all that sort of stuff was totally unacceptable. It was something where British people are the villains. I mean, even see it in Hollywood films and everything, the culture, zeitgeist, and all that sort of stuff. Whether it be sci-fi like your Star Wars or what have you, British people are the villains. And when you think about a person it has that effect on them. You know, it's kind of like the boomers and the myth of World War II and all that sort of stuff. It has that effect. Today, Dan said it was actually really good leadership for Trump to stop the war now rather than carrying on. Total copium. Oh, well, that's just ridiculous, Dan. That is ridiculous. If I need to look, I haven't actually watched that, so I need to sort of watch that. But if that is his analysis, then um, it's not very It's not very sensible interpretation. And look, when I was in the Conservative Party, I did initially, when I had these internal doubts, I did have like some, and this is many, many years ago now, but I did have internal doubts and I did like cope until the point where it became so self-evident that I realized, no, these people are a bunch of lying bastards. They're the entire worldview that I thought I understood was total sham and a lie, and I'm going to leave these guys. That was how it happened for me. And look, yeah, you invest time, effort, many videos. You probably go back through my back catalogue. I'm you know, what, 5-6 years ago now, maybe 7 years ago. You could probably find, you know, very, very old streams where I'm supporting Trump. We all did. But the thing though is, you don't double down, because this is where this is like total peasant brain. This is like, you know, your sort of normie friend, or, you know, uncle or aunt, you know, where they'll put their political colours, like wear it like some football shirt, and then are just dogmatically in support of this part. I mean, number one, parties don't care about you, and first of all, like, Dan, this is a foreign political party, a foreign political movement. So you know, I don't know why you're so fucking attached to it. But second, you know, this is such a peasant-minded thing to be, you know, caught up in. If it was your own, if he was like doubling down on something like a position he held, an ideological position that he, or some sort of innovation that he had come up with and discovered, or formulated, I can understand that, you know, because it'd be his sort of thing. I can understand that, or something he physically invested into. Um, but that is ridiculous. You know, Britain isn't at fault because the American military sucks. At least when the British military was on, when the British, you know, when our empire was on the way out, we could still beat communists in Malaysia, in Indochina. We could still beat Mau Mau rebels in Kenya and Uganda. We could still beat Argentinians on the, you know, the Falkland Islands in the South Atlantic. We could still beat, you know, these savages in Sierra Leone, and even put up a decent fight in Helmand Province, mind you, the worst and the most violent province in Afghanistan, and the, you know, the main stomping ground of the Taliban, and hold our own. Even then, you know, and you could say lowest point in Britain, at these various lowest points, we were our boys, our people were still able to hold themselves. We didn't have fancy. A lot of those times, we didn't have fancy equipment. We didn't have. We had what we had was exceptional training. We had men who were exceptionally trained, disciplined, and we had leadership on a level of military leadership that was able to win. We had a population which was still mentally strong. You know, whatever we think of, you know, boomers and you know, and people from, you know, the you know, from the Second World War and older generations, they were incredibly mentally strong. You know, part of that vigor and that vitality. You don't see that in America with Americans. And this is the thing, and it's something that Dan, you know, has to realize. You know, this war wasn't for the glory or the um, prosperity of Americans. It was for Israel. It is just for them. It was a private war just for them. And America, Trump, made America a laughing stock on the world stage because of for them. That is the reality. And that is, you know, he can lash out. I mean, the fact that he lashes out against British people or Britain is fucking disgraceful. And quite frankly, he should retire from the scene, never to be seen from again. Exile that piece of shit. You know, he should have stuck with his econ. You know, should have stuck with his Cecilio econ. But I don't know. I need to check and see what he said exactly. But that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. You know, if I ever become that delusional on the subject, just end me. Someone in chat will just come find me and end me. I don't want to be like, you know, I don't think I'd never be like that. But I mean, one rule I've given myself is with like these sorts of stories. I waited on this whole story with the, you know, the countdown deadline sort of stuff until, you know, a few days after, because I wanted to see to get the full picture of what would happen. And yeah, big nothing burger. Blame us. Well, I mean, sorry if you uh sorry Americans, maybe if we weren't fucked over with the Suez, you know, right back along, maybe Britain would still have a good functioning uh empire, or, you know, decent part of an empire, which they didn't actively try to, in the years after, undermine and wanting to, you know, do away with for their own, you know, self-benefit. Teaming up with the Soviet Union, mind you, there may be, you know, if Britain could do its thing, then maybe we'd still have a, you know, a decent sized navy, army, functioning society, um, to do everything. But you know, I mean, a function. What this is kind of like the naivety, and it's a mix of American naivety and chauvinism. But what you have is they're just not good at anything. I mean, number one, they haven't won a war on their own. They can't win wars. They can win in coalitions and allies and that sort of stuff. I mean, even then it's a bit touch and go, but they can, you know, win through that. But they can't win a war, and they usually get beaten by, you know, tribesmen or the or um you know, little yellow fellas in rice paddy fields. I mean, but Dan, is that Britain's fault? You know, is that Britain's fault? The tribesmen. and this is like the most ridiculous thing. Is like probably in his mind, in Dan's mind, it's kind of like if 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 we contributed our barely functioning navy and everything, it would have made a difference. Like what? Like fucking what? I tell you what, if I was running Lotus Eaters, I wouldn't have that guy on. I mean, he sort of demonstrated a bit in a wee bit that his analysis is totally fucked, totally warped. We don't. I mean, number one, we don't have a functioning military. Most of our military is already wrapped up with America. Our pilots who receive testing, flight testing, it's joint with America. We have the Five Eyes. We can't use our nuclear sub, the nuclear capabilities on the sub without American backing. So, it. I don't know what he's getting at there. What sort of planet he's on. He's sort of sounding a bit like Donald Trump in some regards. But that being said, and then I mean, not to mention the fucking dancing Iranians. Okay, so let's just say we did get involved and we were able to we would bomb them from the air. We bomb them from the air, and then all those privileged Californianized Iranians, monarchists, who didn't really want, because one of them admitted they didn't really want the crown prince back. He'd just be like a transitional leader, would take over the country, like literally fly in with their pom poms and their dancing, hot pants and all that sort of crap, and their lattes, and take over governing Iran. Make that make sense. And I do think that let me just see if I can find Tommy Robinson for a sec, because he needs a good bash. I mean, maybe I'm targeting Dan unfairly here, but okay, yeah, I've had enough of you. Let's find Tommy. Let's find. Oh, Tommy Zionson. I wonder if he's deleted it. Oh, Tommy Zionson. I mean, he sort of moved on to, schoolgirls handed rape alarms, sort of like stories, and cousin marriages, and in Australia. So he sort of moved on to back into his slop posting. I think he may have deleted it, or he's buried it. I think he's deleted it. So basically, he put out a tweet saying that the Iranian regime is bountiful people on the streets, and you see this story that he puts out, he retweets every now and again, that these Iranian rebels have taken over control of several cities in the western portion of Iran. It's only a matter of time. The military is about to collapse. I mean, as we've seen with the pilot story, that's not true, because it is actually in the western part of Iran all that happened, and they seem quite united in attacking American planes, so to speak. So that isn't true. Maya Tuzi, of course, an Iranian chap himself, has been very, very embedded in this whole narrative. And then the other one, and I've seen this for a long time, is, and you see particularly from the Iranian diaspora and others in the Zionist network, they say Iran isn't actually Islamic anymore. The vast majority of the population is either, atheist, agnostic, Zoroastrian, Christian, or other, which doesn't stand to, and I've this. I mean, first of all, that doesn't stand to any analytical scrutiny. The one that they use is usually by um, the monarchist, like pro-monarchist line from various groups. They're supposedly like studies from within, but number one, I don't know how you're able to gather that information from within. But also, uh, if you look at, say, the smaller ethnic tribes, the way that they practice their version, of Shia Islam is like it's communal. It starts within the family. It would be, you would have to have literally an army of missionaries, of atheists, agnostics, redditors, Christian evangelicals, and Zoroastrians to have that impact. Like literally, you have to have an army, like 500,000 strong army, to break that communal bond, so to speak. I'm not saying there isn't, of course there are, but to say that like it's a, it's a minority is factually wrong. It is factually wrong, as it has been demonstrated. As ultimately, what it has been demonstrated is that the majority of Iranians, or the Iranian public at large, are loyal to the current regime still. Sure, you have dissenters and people that aren't, but if there was any genuine will, it would have been overthrown. There was a period where it could have been. The leadership was taken out. Someone in the military could have taken the, reins of power to do that change. They didn't. And as pointed out, in the video we watched, they're actually stronger now than ever, united as ever. And those exiled Iranians, I think now you have to. I think now there's going to have to be like this whole thing of, look, you're going to have to come to terms with the reality, and the reality is you were delusional. You probably spent decades totally deluded on the direction of the country, and you allowed yourself become basically radicalized with your own ideological beliefs, that you actually don't know your countrymen very well. I would like to say that I could probably I'm quite in tune with the average British person. That's something I'd like to say. I think most of us are. I know what would make a British person tick, what wouldn't. I mean, hell, I had to run for elections locally. I did quite well. I got an MP and a couple other councillors elected. So I know what British people want. Largely, I can sort of ascertain their wants and desires of my own people. These people can't. And they come across, the propaganda back in Iran has shown them cheering on them getting bombed. Any goodwill, I mean, that's been severed. That's been severed. And it could be like with the French Huguenots, where effectively there was this total, when it got to the point where, France wasn't going to be a Protestant country, they cut themselves off, and it was like, well, that's it. We're out. We're gone. When we're not that anymore. But and look, I have this view. I don't like having, and as history has shown, particularly for Britain, going back to the Victorian period, for God's sake, if you have dissidents from countries who are radicals, who other countries didn't want, I mean, they all seem to come to Britain. I mean, even fucking Marx came to be buried here, for God's sake. Eastern European, well, I say Eastern Europe, from the Pale, anarchists, socialists, Marxists, revolutionaries, living, coming to London, East End, the great East End left-wing tradition by immigrants, radical extremists. Unfortunately, we do have a long history of accepting these people, and actively they make this country less safe. They make it more divided, and they contribute to, the absolute degradation of our capital. I think one thing that I think more people on our side of things need to be more angry about is what's the state of our capital. Not just attacking Sadiq Khan and all that sort of thing. That you can attack him for things, but this is more of like a national, global political thing. Look what's happened to our capital and the demonstrations that go on there. It isn't British now because it has just been raped. It's been raped by every fucker with a flag. It has been raped spiritually, physically by every fucker with a flag. And that is the truth of the matter. I mean, if you just watch like a DJI media, I see like a clip from him, and he just goes around filming parts of London. And it's like, what are we meant to do? Dan, you want us to be helping the world policemen? We can't control our own capital. We can't control our major cities. The countryside is now a battleground. Like, our people are weak. They have no leadership. They're addicted to all the terrible vices. They can be incredibly vile. They are easily manipulated. We're in a very bad state. And people who we rely on leadership, even with Rupert, there is still that residual, that residual weakness there to get beyond. We have to dream bigger than this. We cannot just accept this current lot. We can't accept it. We have to think bigger. We have to believe in. This is actually something we have to do now. We have to actually believe in Britain. We have to believe in a Britain which is different from what we see today. What we see today, that we believe it can be better, it can be different. We don't have to be, beholden to America. We don't have to be. I mean, in some regard, and I hate to say this, I had to get into like the religious side of this. One, but beyond like the political, and I haven't talked about this, the religious side of it, because I don't really like talking about this because it sounds kooky anyway. But there are people who believe that this is going to fulfill prophecies which will um, bring about the Jewish Messiah, and the evangelicals who, and that's a separate matter, but they believe that this will bring on the second coming of Christ and the building of the temple. And you're sort of going into, I mean, it's when you talk about it, it sounds it sounds a bit David Icke, it sounds a bit Alex Jonesy, but this is what they've been saying. This is what they say. This is what animates them. This is what animates them. And do you know what? Their hatred. Because one thing you find, and I was reading, I actually bought, well, I bought an ebook on, it was one thing that Benjamin Netanyahu was reading, which was the history of the Roman Jewish wars. In China today, their great myth is, and what animates them is never again. So never again for them is never again a century of humiliation caused by the British over the Opium Wars, the loss of Hong Kong, the loss of sovereignty, and also then China being carved up between European powers and sphere of influence, economic influence and all that, not just territorial. And what animates the Communist Party today is never again being under foreign influence. And Xi Jinping even said that in part of his speech a few years ago. That's Chinese thing. In Israel, theirs is about defeating Rome. Theirs is about undoing all the wrongs that happened to them from that from the Bar Kokhba revolt and the various Jewish wars that got Jerusalem destroyed and rebuilt as a Roman colonna, and their largely expulsion from Roman Judea. And when you think of Rome, I mean, Rome is the foundation of European civilization, of Britain, and all our societies. Even the Anglo-Saxons, many many Saxons and Jutes, some even served in the Federati legions. And yeah, they have like this there is this residual crazy grudge. They even go to we talked about the Arch of Titus in Rome. They go there. I mean, if you go on YouTube or anywhere, you see hundreds of fucking clips of them, having these, sort of ritualistic, fuck yous to the Arch of Titus. Like, why isn't? I mean, number one, someone in Italy, Italian patriot. If any Italian patriot is watching, you need to write. They need to stop that. I wouldn't allow, if I was Italian and a Roman, modern Roman that is, a citizen of Rome, I wouldn't allow any foreign national to publicly denigrate my ancestors like that, or a symbol, a historic symbol of my city like that. I would not allow that to happen. But that's just me. I wouldn't allow that to happen. But this sort of goes to that mentality is, and I think, I mean, there are people who understand that in Europe. There are people that understand that sort of level of grudge. But, this is where Britain there was a lot of the a lot of people who are critical anti-Zionists from the left will say, well, this is Britain's fault because of the Balfour Declaration. And look, yeah, creating a brand new state in modern era was bad, particularly on the ethno-religious um, confinement of what you have there in the Middle East was a bad call. I think it was a bad call. We can all agree it was a bad call, a bad decision. But the thing though is, and I would say, is if Israel behaved like a normal state, a normal country, this wouldn't happen. And because they have this crazy uber religious fever through revelations and divine fate, well, I don't know how you sort of divine privilege from God in their own understanding, this is what you get. And this is where it comes down to national sovereignty. Americans need to have their next president. It has to be someone who can, put a stop to this. I mean, I know, without getting JFK, but then you need to have, but same in Britain as well. You need to have that fortitude to stand up to foreign influence. Even if some of the most vocal people who can gather a lot of attention or get angry, so be it. If there are media outlets that will run hit pieces, so be it. Because on current trajectory, they're just going to end society. They just get ends. I mean, talk about ending a civilization. Trump the other day, like, well, that didn't happen last night, but it sure as hell happening with our society, with our civilization. It is ending. He was right about what a civilization ending. There is a civilization ending. It's not Iran's. It's not anyone's in the Middle East. It's ours. I mean, we're just being killed. We're just being like 1,000 cuts bleeding out from within, and it has to stop. I think that has to be the rallying cry for all of us, really. Now, it's not about all these silly issues of the past. The distracted issues, all the trans stuff, all the things which are just symptoms. Who we're not about that now. Now it's just about. It's just about we can't have these foreign actors in running amok in our countries anymore. They're too dangerous. They're too dangerous and they're out of control. So yeah, I'm getting quite tired now, so I'm going to head off. But thank you, people, for listening, and I will see you all next time.